Will the Committee on Budget please come to order? I would like to welcome our Committee Vice Chair Wire as well as Councilmember Kia Aina. And we will be welcoming Councilmember Say as well. Oh, and also welcome to Councilmember Say. Councilmember Toba is, I believe, on his way. Okay, moving forward. Pursuant to Section 92-3.7 HRS, this meeting will be conducted as a remote meeting by interactive conference technology with the following procedures in effect for this meeting. Members of the public who will be allowed to provide oral testimony on all items on the agenda 2 ways: remotely and in person in the council chamber. Remote and in-person oral testimony will be allowed when the agenda item is taken up. Before testifying, each person shall state their name, and each person may not have anyone else read their statement. And it is limited to a 1-minute presentation on each item. All persons who have registered to testify remotely by video conference will be called upon first. When your name is called, please monitor your screen and activate your audio feed when prompted. I will then give persons who have not registered an opportunity to offer testimony. Please utilize raise hand feature on Zoom to be called upon. For those joining us by telephone only, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. I will then identify you by your last 3 digits of your phone number. When your number is called, please press *6. Once again, *6 to unmute yourself when prompted. And I will repeat myself if we have any phone numbers. Okay, we have some friendly reminders and tips. Please video conference from a quiet location if possible. And if you're also watching the proceedings on Olelo, please mute your television at the time you are called to testify. When the timer on screen reaches 0, please conclude your remarks promptly. Once all the remote testifiers have testified, I will proceed to in-person testimony in the council chamber. Persons who have not registered will be given an opportunity to speak following the oral testimonies of the registered speakers. HR Section 92-3.7 requires all votes at remote meetings to be conducted by a roll call unless unanimous. Therefore, I will first call for objections, and if there are any, I will call for a roll call vote. For those council members, if we have any council members participating from outside of the council chamber, in accordance with HRS and Section 92-3.7, the meeting will automatically recess if we lose audiovisual contact with you and cannot reconvene until we reestablish contact. Therefore, please announce beforehand if you will be voluntarily signing out of the meeting. With that, I would also like to welcome Councilmember Toba to the committee. Moving forward, written testimonies, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, will be available to the public and as described on the posted agenda. As a courtesy, please silence or turn off all cell phones. Moving forward, action item number 1. For action, we have Resolution 23-262, which authorizes a transfer not to exceed $148,250 from the provision for grants, partnerships, and security activity, current expenses to the Department of Parks and Recreation, Urban Forestry Program activity from current expenses for fiscal year 2024 to cover the matching contribution required by the Department of Agriculture, United States Forest Service, for the city to continue the city street and park tree inventory and asset management system. With us from the city administration, we have Deputy Director of the Department of Parks and Recreation, Kehaulani Pu'u. Aloha, Deputy Director.
Mahalo, good morning. Committee Chair, Vice Chair, and Council members. So this is a reso authorizing transfer of a little under $149,000. This is matching funds to a grant that DPR's Division of Urban Forestry acquired through Congressman Ed Case's office with the help of our OCCSR office. And this is to inventory all of our trees, our park and street trees, and we've actually expanded the scope to include other city trees, and then also create an asset management system. The matching funds are actually only half of the match because our contractor came in at a lower bid, so we don't need the full, so we're asking for half of those funds.
Thank you for sharing that, and it's good to hear that you're asking for half of the funds. But if you could please explain, Deputy Director, a little bit about how it goes through the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency, and then how it gets to the Department of Parks and Recreation.
Shoot, I'm unable to explain that process. It's just that OCCSR has been they've been on it in terms of looking out for opportunities, grant opportunities. And so they actually alerted DPR to this opportunity for this grant and kind of supported us throughout the process.
Thank you. And so since the $148,250 is half, what then happens to the rest of the half? We just return them to the Department of Agriculture.
So the other half, which is so Department of Agriculture has given the 300, but we only have to match half. So the other half, I guess, stays in that provision for grants and all that other stuff. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Members, before I have any other questions, are there any other questions of the committee? Committee Vice Chair Wire.
Mahalo, Chair, and thank you, Deputy Director, for being here. Just to make sure I understand, so the outside funding, we got the full amount, or is there more money we could use because the contract was lower?
So with the grant plus our matching funds will be fully funded to continue with this contract.
Okay.
Yeah.
The reason I'm asking, I'm just curious if there's other funds we can access, because I was at a meeting last night on CRB, and I know that it's affecting some of the city trees.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I don't want to dive into that now, but I'm just wondering, is the department looking at funding sources for that particular issue?
But so this administration is actually looking, very keenly at other grant opportunities. One of the challenges is the capacity within the department to apply and then also manage and do all the reporting for these grants. So we are trying to build our capacity internally, ask for positions that can focus on helping to manage these kinds of external grants and also even donations and stuff. So I'll be honest, I mean, it is a bit of a challenge. We have a few, including FRF funds, where we are having to manage, but we need to seek other resources, especially for the CRB issue.
Okay. Mahalo.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair.
And before that, I just want to clarify that CRB is coconut rhinoceros beetle?
Correct. Yeah, it's coconut rhinoceros beetle. I know Vice Chair's talked a lot about invasives, and I think one thing we're seeing is that particular for, some of the city trees, it's impacting them. Like up at Royal Palm right now, they're doing the state's doing a cleanup, I guess, or whatever the word, treatment, and so I think it's something the city's going to have to prepare for and contemplate in budget in particular because of just the growing impact on our community and agriculture. But yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for explaining. Okay, members, any other questions? Okay, Deputy Director Pu'u, I just have one more question. How much of this transfer of the match will have to cover administrative costs?
I don't know that information at this time.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. But I believe the entire amount goes for the contract, but I can find out.
Okay, thank you. All right, perfect. Okay, Council Vice Chair Kia Aina.
Thank you, Chair. To follow up with what Vice Chair Wire just mentioned, I just wanted to let you know I'd like to sit down with either yourself or the director. I briefly mentioned how the city could kokua in the short term with regarding the Oahu Invasive Species Committee because they are expecting up to 6 staff who are going to be helping on the little fire ant, which is a major problem, and they need a base yard. And I did a site visit at Kahului District Park with some of the community members. So I just wanted to let you know that I'd like to sit down with you guys in person to further discuss in concert with Councilmember Wire.
Okay, Hikino.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Any other questions? Okay, we can come back to the Deputy Director when we go back to discussion, but we're going to move on to testimony. We don't have any registered testifiers online or in person, but I do see Angela Young's hand raised.
Aloha, Chair and the City Council. Angela Melody Young testifying in strong support of the transfer of funds. So I just want to stress the importance of the support, why we should support trees. So the USDA, the federal level management branch of the Urban and Community Forestry Program says this: over 90% of our region's population lives in urban communities. Many urban communities depend on trees but are unaware of the trees' economic, environmental, and social service impact. Urban trees along backyards, parks, greenways, and gardens offer a lot of things like enhancing public health and quality of life, sequestering carbon, so it reduces carbon, while providing habitats for wildlife and cleaning the water we drink and the air we breathe, to name a few. So at the state, it's managed by the DLNR, Department of Land and Natural Resources, the Kaulani Urban and Community Forestry Program.
Hey, Angela, may I have you wrap up your testimony, please?
Yeah, and also from DLNR is the Invasive Species Council. So that'd be a good place to start to work on the things that you guys just talked about. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay. Is there anyone else, either in person or online, who wishes to testify? Seeing none, moving forward, members, we're back in discussion. Any other discussion regarding item number 1? Okay, seeing none. Oops, I lost myself. The chair recommends that Resolution 23-262 be reported out for adoption. Any discussion? Any objections? Any reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Before moving on to item number 2, I would also like to welcome Council Chair Waters to the committee. Okay. Can I please mute? Thank you. Okay, so moving on to agenda item number 2, Resolution 23-269. It authorizes a transfer not to exceed $11,997.90 from the Department of Emergency Management's Emergency Management Coordination Activity from current expenses to the Department of Emergency Management's Emergency Management Coordination Activity equipment. So basically in the same division, but different codes. Okay. Current expenses to equipment for the fiscal year 2024 to cover the cost of replacing outdated and end-of-service life P25 public safety radio equipment used to communicate with and amongst first responders during potential and/or actual human-caused or natural disasters. With us from the City Administration, we have the Director of Department of Emergency Management, Director Toya. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Committee Chair, Committee Vice Chair, and Council Chair, Council Vice Chair, and Council members. Hiro Toya for the Department of Emergency Management. So DEM has a volunteer corps, about 100 strong active volunteers. They were formerly called the Civil Defense Volunteers, but now the name is the Emergency Management Reserve Corps. And these are active volunteers that go out during emergencies, or in some cases planned events. They actually supported the Veterans Day ceremony at Punch Bowl this past weekend. And the radio system is their lifeline. So they are part of the city's interoperable communication systems. So this allows us to communicate with our volunteers, but also the volunteers can communicate with our first responders. So it happens that the radios are now over the $5,000 threshold to be considered now equipment. And so we're asking for the transfer of funds from budgets that are already allotted to DEM to just move to a different category so that we can purchase these radios as equipment.
Thank you. Members, before I move on to questions, Director Toya, I was just wondering, because I feel like I'm having deja vu. I swear, just earlier this year, we discussed receiving funds for the P25 and end of service life, hold on. I don't know what it was called. End of year, wait.
End of service.
End of life, yeah, end of service.
You're correct, ma'am.
Lifespan. Okay, so, but we had a resolution just a few months ago, yeah?
This was actually late last year.
Late last year.
Yeah, this was in the FY23 budget.
Yes.
And by the time we started prepping for the FY24 budget, we had already submitted this as a current expense item, and didn't realize the price was over the equipment threshold. So moving forward from FY25 forward, we will budget this as equipment rather than in the current expense category.
Okay, so these are the same amount of P25s that we're funding, but just it was just a little more.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that. Members, are there any questions for Director Toya? relating to this. I remember that the same type of questions I had for the form, it was Resolution 23-103 from last fiscal year. Like how long do these normally last? Like what is the lifespan of the
Yeah,
P25?
it's 5 to 10 years with good care, and we get support from the Honolulu Fire Department's radio shop to maintain these.
Okay, and I also last time too, when was the last time it was replaced before us purchasing these same ones?
So we're actually doing this on a rotating basis so that we don't have to do all 100 at one time. We also are able to receive some older equipment from HPD when applicable. Want to make sure that our first responders have the latest equipment. And where possible, we will take those sort of hand-me-down radios and try to extend the life of those equipment.
Okay, and how many radios P25s does this cover?
This is for 2 radios.
2. Okay, thank you. And then if we're doing 2 and it's on a rotating basis, how many are still functional?
I'm sorry, can you ask?
How many are still functional?
Well, all the radios are still functional.
How many are there?
We have about 100 out there that
100,
are functional.
okay.
So we'll continue to do this on a revolving basis. And I think there may come a time shortly where we have to ask for a larger amount of money to be able to replace them.
Okay, I remember HFD kind of saying something. Oh, maybe I shouldn't talk about it. Anyway, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Director Toya? Okay, but understood. Thank you for letting me go back into deja vu land there. Okay, moving forward to registered testifiers. We don't have any registered testifiers for in-person or online, but I do see Angela Young's hand raised.
Aloha, City Councilor Angela Melody Young, testifying in strong support of the transfer of funds. And on behalf of CARES, as a public policy advocate, grassroots, and also as a concerned citizen because of the emergency impact of the things that happened. So, public policy, at the public policy level, I want to read the federal level website, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency.gov, and their data about wireless communications, right? And how this affects emergencies. So 2 surveys of more than 2,000 emergency response agencies documented the major obstacles to interoperability. The Law Enforcement, Fire Response, and Emergency Medical Services Agency surveyed rated spectrum and funding limitations as their biggest hindrances. And they identified incompatible technologies and the lack of adequate systems planning as additional obstacles. Also, human factors, lack of coordination, and lack of cooperation.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, moving forward, is there anyone else who wishes to testify? Okay, seeing none. Members, the chair recommends that Resolution 23-269 be reported out for adoption. Any discussion? Any objections? Any reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Moving forward, agenda item number 3. Resolution 23-279 authorizes a transfer not to exceed $134,776 from the provision for vacant positions activity current expenses for the Office of the Managing Director, City Management Activity salaries for fiscal year 2024 to fund salaries of existing positions. With us from the administration, we have the Deputy Director of the Office of Economic Revitalization, Kim Sparlin.
Good morning, Chair. Appreciate this opportunity to humbly come before you and ask for $134,776 to make up for the shortfall that we had. We appreciate, the council's support as we transition from state local fiscal recovery funded and pandemic-related funded, and are very gracious and humbled that you approve the positions as we transition through. And unfortunately, we do have a $134,000, almost $135,000 shortfall that we come back to help with. This will cover the balance on 10 positions that are on personal service contracts right now while we're going through that formal reorganization. This should not happen again next year, as these positions will be in the reorg and they'll be general funded, or as positions and not on contract. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you'd like more information on what specific positions.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions? Okay, Councilmember Toba.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for letting me know. 10 positions, right? So when do you anticipate OER, the reorganization process, to be complete?
So it's a multi-step process. Right now, we're going through putting all the paperwork to send to the union in order for them to have their opportunity to opine. And then these positions will be put into the full org chart within not only OER, but the managing director's office. And then next year, we'll be asking for a few more positions, and then we'll have to do this all over again. So.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Oh,
Thank
okay.
you.
Thank you, Councilmember Toba. Members, any questions? Okay. Members, any questions? Okay. Do you happen to know with this transfer, how much would then be left in the provision for vacant positions?
I don't, but I'm happy to look into that.
Okay, thank you. And relating to the
I'm sorry, can I just qualify? You want the PVP for the
Yes,
full
of
city?
course, yes.
Okay.
Yes, and how much, actually, good point. How much OER has received transfers from the provision for vacant positions, I guess, within this fiscal year and last fiscal year too?
So to date, we've received nothing.
Nothing.
We've been fortunate to have the pandemic relief funds that have really uplifted our office. And as we're transitioning from that funding to support what the Council Resolution 2197 that was approved back in October of 2020, and we're transitioning these positions to fulfill that vision of the Council and supporting our community and its economic development, as most people say, kind of getting away from that revitalization and what we're going to look like under blue skies and being prepared for the next gray sky event.
Okay, if you could remind the public and the members, as you see, majority of us were not here in October 2020, what you're talking about, what that resolution does?
Yeah, thank you for that. So we're, again, very humbled that this is something that the City Council, not only previous iterations, but you here in this room and the full council support as something that the city should be doing for our community. For many years, it was kind of left to across the street and with the state. We feel like this is something that we very much need to have a voice and we need to have a role in what our economic situation looks like and what we can do to help uplift our neighbors, our family members, and our community so that we can live a life with good jobs, with quality of life, issues that are not just constantly burdened by financial considerations that everybody goes through every day, everybody in this room, everybody outside of this room. And so that resolution established the Office of Economic Revitalization. It took the positions from the Office of Economic Development that were 5.5 positions, repurposed them, and focused on areas like agriculture, small business specifically. That's where we focus, workforce development, I should have had the resolution in front of me, but there's 9 different areas.
Deputy Director, I know that it was established in 2020, or I guess the resolution was passed in 2020. So then I know that it transferred to like a majority response to the pandemic then. And so I know that there were a lot of possibly personal service contracts contracted from 2021 to even possibly now. So what happens to the positions that are no longer doing response to a pandemic? So what are those positions doing now? And also, I mean, how have we redefined those roles? And do we really need that many more people when we had so many personal service contracts already in those positions?
Thank you. Yes, I absolutely think that we need that many positions, and if I was going to be completely selfish and ignore all the other issues going on in our community, I would advocate for more, frankly. We are transitioning through not only council with you, but council with the administration and the Economic Revitalization Commission that was stood up last year. And they are coming up with some of that action item planning over the next 5 years of what they want us to focus on, what they, as community representatives that you have confirmed to speak on behalf of our community, what we should be focusing on. So yes, absolutely, those positions are being converted from direct pandemic response to, again, what do we do to support our community so that we are more nimble, so that we are better prepared in the event of the next emergency. There will be another one. We know that. That's the reality of our life. So what can we do to help people be prepared? We're focusing on good jobs, whether that's being a small business owner yourself, whether that's it being a side gig, right? So maybe you have your full-time job, you have your benefits, you have your retirement, but you want a little bit extra money to help your kid get to college or take them to Disneyland or whatever it is. And so what is it that we want our community to look like? So we've stood up a data team to start asking those questions of what does our community want our economy to look like? Not what do we think it should look like based on what the mainland does, but really how unique we are. We are, again, supporting small businesses, going out, speaking with them directly, providing them with access to resources that are already in the community. There are a lot of free resources that just people don't know about. We're supporting the agriculture industry from the economic perspective. That's an area that's really a focus to us, not only from the economy, but also the resilience and the health perspective. And health is so tied to the economy and the well-being of our community. We're working in the space, again, of workforce development, innovation, and technology to try and bring some of that into our community as well and tap into those benefits, not only from the products that they produce, but also the salaries that they produce, right? I can go on, sorry.
No, it's okay. Okay, so we do have more questions, but I have one last question for you before I move on to other committee members. Okay, so my last question is relating to the stand-up of different offices within the city. We saw with OCCSR, Office of Climate Change and Sustainability and Resiliency, we saw them receiving a lot of like AmeriCorps as well as different vistas and federal funding to support their growth of their department. And so with a lot of the things that we're talking about, there's different federal agencies that could support us as municipalities, especially with different grants and funding sources. Is OER looking at that too, to not just give money to administrative costs, but for positions as well, which is what OCCSR did too.
Absolutely. Couple of things. First, we are working closely with the University of Hawaii to get interns to come in, so not only for our own needs, but also to develop the workforce of the future. We are in the running. We're in the final stage for a 2.5-year fellowship with the International Economic Development Council. So this is a mid-career level person to come in and help us do some research that we just don't have the bandwidth to do, completely free of cost to the city. But I'm also happy to, and I'm gonna look at Councilmember Kia Aina because I know she's gonna ask me this question anyway. I'm happy to announce that we are within days of posting to hands, but posting out on the street a contract to do first for a company or an individual to come out and help us with the grant writing, but also the processes. And so it's not just come in and help us write a bunch of grants and leave, it's help leave us better, when this contract is over. It will support not only the Office of Economic Revitalization, it will help support the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency, as well as the Mayor's Office on the Culture and the Arts. So coming in, really looking at the processes, getting some just generic, things together that we can put forth as folks get ready to do the grants. I think the biggest thing that I just want to remind folks is that we have to have a cost match most of the time, especially when you go after federal funds, and the personnel is qualified expense as part of that cost match. If we don't have a person in that position, we don't have skin in the game. And the feds are gonna go, this isn't important to you, you're not even putting your own money to this. So it's really important for us to have those folks, not only to then write the application, show the feds that we're serious to this, use that cost match, but then manage that because there's a lot of management on the back end as well. We also anticipate in those grants that we would build in some of that cost as well to cover whether it's additional expense, but we can't even do that. We're not competitive if we don't have these positions. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember, Council Vice Chair Kia Aina, and then Committee Vice Chair Wire after.
Thank you. I'm interested in two issues, of course. Agriculture, Dexter Kishida, I know, went to the Department of Agriculture for the state, and I am worried about the reprogramming of funds for the second phase of the agricultural grants program. So first off, who is going to replace him? What is the status of his position? And what is the status of the grant? Because as I mentioned, we are having an informational briefing on ARPA funds, and there's grave concern by all of us with regard to the costs associated with hazard pay relating to COVID. So can you tell me who is replacing Dexter Kashida, and what is the status of the reprogramming of funds for phase 2?
Yes, thank you for your constant support in our ag sector. We definitely appreciate that. We are ongoing recruiting for that position, frankly. We've interviewed a few folks, not quite the right matches. So if anyone knows anybody that can manage grants and can write grants and really bring the industry together from the infrastructure perspective, we'll take those applications any day. OER at honolulu.gov. With respect to the actual ag grant itself, it has not been sitting on a shelf since he left. Amy has taken the charge on that and is continuing to work with two folks that stay on our ag team, our food equity access specialists that are pushing that through. So it's in the early phases of procurement. We're going through all the legalese of it, and then hope to have that out on the street before too long.
Okay, I was not aware that you guys were actively looking. I would recommend, and I know you guys are busy, but let us know. So I like the link because I'll advertise within my community, and I think other members would be interested as well.
We will forward that today.
The other position I'm interested in is the Pacific Islander liaison position. I'd like to find out what is the status of that position, and when does that position expire? And second, what is the status of the funding for COFA grants for death benefits relating to COVID?
Thank you. So, as a personal service contract, it's a 1 year contract. It's a 12-month contract. So the current contract was initiated and effective January 1st, 2023. Therefore, it terminates on December 31st, 2023. We have put in the amendment in order to extend that through for the SLFRF funding, to extend that through next September as far as we're allowed to use that funding. But that is a position that we have been talking about on a greater city scale of what that means. With respect to the actual death benefits program itself, it is still in the procurement process. They've been going up and back on the responses that came in, and they're going through that. So we don't anticipate too much longer before that being able to go to contract, but there have been some challenges in procurement.
Okay, so a couple of things. First, I'm not happy about the time allocation for the overall administration over that grant. And while I believe that that position has other kuleana, programmatic funding is so important, that should be a top priority, not just going out to outreach events. Second, and I think you need to start broadening it now. You cannot be narrowly tailoring it, this position simply to non-Hawaiian Pacific Islander communities. There's a lot of communities that need help, including our Southeast Asian communities, right? And our Hawaiian community and other communities. So that's all. So as you're thinking about that, you better start broadening it, because otherwise, if you're trying to embed that in the annual budget, you're going to have a hard time. So again, if there was funds put in last year's budget for a specific program and it has not been done yet, it's very concerning to me. Thank you.
Thank you. In relation to that, maybe Council Vice Chair Kiaina, if you want to list specifically, and then we can get a response back to the Committee on Budget. Okay, and hopefully you will be willing to respond back to the committee. Thank you, Deputy Director. Next, Committee Vice Chair Wire.
Mahalo, Chair. Good morning. Thank you, Deputy Director, for being here. A few questions. First, I'm just curious if you could elaborate on what OED would do different or touch on instead of, versus what they do across the street. And then also just the role that you have played or could play in the sister cities relationship.
So the original OED managed the sister city relationship, and that has since moved over to the mayor's office on culture and the arts. So that was an easy one to get that one out of the way. As far as what we can do that's different than what the state does, I think when you think about just the structure of government, the state is looking statewide. There's not that specific focus on Honolulu, and we recognize that every island is different and their needs are different, their communities are different. Even within the island itself, the communities are different. So one of the things that we pride ourselves on is actually going out into those communities and talking to folks and listening to folks to then develop the programs. That's not something that the state is frankly very good at, and I'm sorry, I came from the state. I feel like I can say that and not like just point fingers, but we're able to bring it down to the grassroots level and not just that high policy level that really is the structure of state government versus the municipality itself, right? And so we're, again, a little bit more nimble. We can go after different federal grants, philanthropic grants, those kind of things. And many times we actually work together. And so being able to bring our voice to that, I think the area of tourism is one of those, right? For a long time, we haven't had a voice. Our community deserves a voice, and that's a role that we're trying to play. If we just sit here and we wait for HTA to make decisions on what's happening in our communities, we're not going to be happy in the long run. So we want to make sure that we have a voice in those conversations, that we're bringing solutions to that. Some other things that we're doing, and I'll just bring that one up because it was something that came up yesterday, is helping some of the smaller communities with ideas that can help stimulate the culture as well as the economy. And so the North Shore Chamber is applying for a grant to put their walking tour as an app. There's so many things that can be done with that. It's something we've been talking around not only in Waikiki, but Chinatown, the North Shore. There's so many different communities you can take that to. People can then link to a website and purchase. They don't even have to come here and they can start purchasing, right? That's something that the North Shore Chamber can do that we can help support and guide them and things like that. There's just a more intimacy, I want to say, being able to work here at the city than what the state does. State is just so much more broad policy.
Well, I appreciate that because, like you said, I think your focus is Oahu. That's our kuleana here, and so I think that's how do we, support economic development. And yeah, I think MOCA is a good fit for sister cities because of the cultural component and the protocol. But then I just wonder if there could be some shared responsibility just because of the economic opportunity. Like I know when we were in Incheon or in Seoul and Incheon, went to some of the HTA events and we're talking to the community, trying to bring back the Korean visitors or increase Korean visitors. But I don't know if you have thoughts on that. But
we've had some conversations, and frankly, I see that in not too distant future as we're pivoting out of this. It's not only bringing their tourists here, but it's taking our products there.
Yeah.
And so this idea of whether you see Mana Up doing it, you see the state doing it, but what can we do for some of our folks to when those officials come here, we're not going to ship a whole bunch of manufacturers over there or producers over there, but when they come here, how can we highlight some of the products here that they can take home as well? And so those are conversations that we've started. But it's going to take a little bit of time.
No, yeah, that'd be perfect. Yeah. I mean, it was really cool when we were in Incheon to see they had like a city-created startup park, for kind of a business hub. They had, a bunch of other types of facilities. They had a city-created global campus where they brought universities from all over the world so people could stay home and get a degree, but, get a degree from an international university, a lot from the U.S. Not that those are exactly the models we want to use, but just seeing that there's opportunities for us as a city to, highlight what Oahu has to offer. And like you said, target specific type of industries that we know are going to benefit our people. And so it's kind of exciting. So appreciate the work you're doing.
You're absolutely speaking my language because some of the other conversations too are right. How do we use city assets to help these small businesses, especially your startup, right? They don't have the capital. They're not going to have access to capital when you're in a startup. That's the way traditional lending unfortunately is. And so how do we help them, I don't want to say test the market, but, kind of, excel, without that extreme cost overhead, but give them the wraparound services so that when the path is, they've moved down the path, they're ready to go to fair market value. That's what we want. We want everybody out there at the fair market value, but we recognize that that's a lot of pain to get there. We want to remove those pain points where we can and where it's appropriate.
No, definitely. And last thought, not to create more work, but I even wonder, well, just the role or the interplay, say Parks Department is just one example going through this commercial activities at public beaches. So like, what does regenerative tourism look like, and what do the departments need? And you're kind of that intermediary between maybe the business community. I mean, is that a role you're filling or see yourself filling?
Yes, and it's funny you mentioned that because it was actually at the town hall in, I think it was Waialua, talked with a small business owner, and they were speaking exactly about that. If, the parks rules change, his surf school goes away. He's been doing it his whole life. What happens? And so being able to be that voice here within the discussions, I think is really, really important to make sure that we're not only protecting our natural resources, that we're protecting those resources for our community, because we want to go to the beach. We want to be able to have time with our family. We don't want to be overrun by tourists, for sure. But how do we balance that to make sure that we're not, putting our neighbor out of a job too?
Oh, definitely. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before I move on to Council Chair Waters, just really quick, I really like what you mentioned to both the vice chairs of the council and the committee relating to both skin in the game and relating to our city assets to assist on holistically, right? At the same time, there are skin in the game, and we need to see that through all different aspects. The skin in the game to get federal funding, the skin in the game to assist the state. But I think a lot of it is the give from the city, but also how we can, in return, receive some of that funding back too, whether it be from the federal government or the state government. So I don't know if there's any ways moving forward at the state level, at the state legislature with session coming up, is there anything in the city administration's priorities or packets that will highlight where OER will be able to get such assets or city assets in return for what we are then giving out to everyone else?
That is an excellent question. I don't have an answer off the top of my head right now, but I will definitely look at that, by all means, and have those conversations with you folks as well. I can tell you that we are not above beg, borrow, stealing, bartering, trading, whatever it is that we can legally do.
Yeah,
we recognize
we need to be in it. We need to play.
I mean, I ran a nonprofit for kids. I ask anybody for anything, So that's just kind of who I am, because we are going to be better if we can all work together, right? And so I think one of the things that we get a little bit frustrated with procurement sometimes because of the process and not being able to name partners in some of these grant applications for violation. But yet we want to use their asset, their resource as part of that cost match.
Right.
And so there's this kind of push-pull that we're constantly negotiating and trying to sort out. So procurement is one of my, hopefully, legacy projects. It's something that I want to have real conversations about. I get why we are where we are. I think it's important to protect the taxpayer dollar by all means. But sometimes it just kind of gets in the way.
Understood. Well, I just want to make sure, because our city assets, we are now showing that we do have skin in the game, but we also want to have return back to,
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Council Chair Waters.
Thank you so much. I like what you just said. We will all be better if we can work together, right? It's so true, so true. And by the way, everything you're saying, preparing for future disasters is so interesting to me. And I think we could probably have an entire briefing in perhaps the Planning and the Economy Committee or some other committee, just letting us know exactly what your office does and how exactly you are planning for future disasters. I'm so interested to find out how we can do that. I don't mean to take away anything that you had to say today, but we do have a briefing later in this agenda dealing with hazard pay. And when we talk about increasing our workforce I think we also have to focus on taking care of the workers that we currently have. And I'm probably going to ask the other directors the same question. What are we doing within your department to take care of the workers we have? Are you determining which workers and which were exposed to COVID who are eligible for hazard pay? Have you gone through that process with your department yet?
Not that I'm aware of.
Was there employees within your department who were exposed to COVID?
We're all exposed to COVID, right? But in respect to their actual duties, right? So at any time, we had folks that were out on the street going into businesses, helping them understand what the latest rules were, making sure that, we weren't there to regulate, we were just there to inform.
Sure.
So people could make good decisions. So there were people that were put out into the street. Now, we also were very cognizant that whenever there was, increased rates, that we brought them back into the office and that they were making phone calls, they were sending emails, and they weren't necessarily going out in person. So safety of personnel was always number one. I can assure you that. Most of everybody else was, WebEx and in the office. And so was there absolutely.
No,
but
just
did
curious.
we minimize it? Yes.
If each department, it goes for the other departments who are here, are you going through each department and determining who was exposed and who wasn't, and who is entitled to hazard pay and who's not? It sounds like you haven't gone through that yet.
I can't speak for other departments, but I can tell you that in our office specifically, I'm not even going to speak for CCSR or MOCA. We have not.
Have not. Okay. Okay, that's helpful to know. Are your employees or contract hires, are they entitled to under collective bargaining? A regular city employee is under the collective bargaining and the contract, which is contract employees, because your office is pretty much made up entirely of contract employees, right?
At this time, yes. So we not only adhere to the same classification schedules, but also the same compensation schedules, which, to your point of taking care of your people, I'm very proud of our team, and I don't think we could pay them enough. And so we try to be very sensitive to that. But yes, we adhere to the same thing out of principle.
Okay, you did talk a little bit about creating good jobs within the community and for our economy, but also looking inward, creating good jobs for our city employees, compensating them adequately. Does your office look at all on how we can generate more revenue for the city? Right, we're talking about generating revenue for businesses and things like that, but how about looking at tourism and how we can generate revenue for the city so that we can provide more services, so we can make your employees full-time, right, rather than contract? Does your office look at that?
We have not yet, as we are in our third year of existence and putting forth those plans. I don't think that that's something that in the future would be out of the realm of the possibility. We are building up, like I said, our data team. So being able to answer those questions, we need to be able to have the team that can look through that data and make sure that we're asking the right questions and that we're getting the right answers. So at this time, we have not. I think it's always something in the back of our mind. How do we increase markets, right? That's your economy. How are we going to do that? And so is it noodling around there? Yes, but have we done anything actively? Not yet.
Well, just a thought, and to kind of put yourself within our shoes. I know you're going to be coming next year during the budget to ask that these contract hires be transferred to civil service, but what would be helpful if you could figure out where that money would come from, right? How do we get that money to do exactly that, in light of the fact that we're going to have to pay raises for under collective bargaining. The hazard pay is still out there, repair and maintenance for rail, all those things we have to consider when we think about converting the contract hires to permanent. So if you can, and I know it's not probably within the scope of your office, but it would be helpful if in your department and every other department can figure out how we can generate more revenue to pay for these city services that your office is providing? So just a thought, you don't have to answer that now, but might be also good within briefing at a later time within my colleagues' committee. So thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, members, any other questions? Any other questions? Okay. All right, moving forward to registered testifiers. If there's any other discussion, we can come back after testimony, yeah? Okay, all right, so moving on to testifiers, we don't have any registered testifiers, and I don't see anyone else wishing to testify. Members, we are back in discussion. Any other kind of discussion? Any other discussion, I mean? Seeing none, okay. Hold on one moment. The chair recommends that Resolution 23-279 be reported out for adoption. Any discussion? Any objections? Any reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Moving forward, agenda item number 4, Resolution 23-263, which identifies the dedicated source of revenue and pledge to repay loans with interest and loan fee provided by the State of Hawaii Water Pollution Control Revolving Fund for various wastewater capital improvement projects. With us from the City Administration, we have the Director for Department of Environmental Services, Director Roger Babcock. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Cordero, Vice Chair Wire, Budget Committee members, and Council Chair Waters. I'm Roger Babcock, Director of the Department of Environmental Services. With respect to Resolution 23-263, which is about wastewater and sewers, I did want to just take this time to make a reminder with the holiday season coming up with lots of large family dinners, including Thanksgiving, that it's important not to dispose of oil and grease into the sewer system. This builds up, it's liquid when you put it in down the sink, but it congeals and forms solid masses in our collection system, and it leads to clogging and spills, which is a big problem for us. So the advice is to wipe plates that are greasy with a paper towel, dispose of those into the refuse in your gray bin. Liquid oil and grease should be collected in some sort of a container and placed also in the gray bin. And if you're going to deep fry a turkey, please let that oil cool, pour it back into the container, and dispose of it into your gray bin cart. The gray carts do go to H-Power, and that material get converted into electricity rather than cause problems in our collection system. So this is about the State Water Pollution Control Revolving Fund, or the State Revolving Fund, which is administered by the State Department of Health Wastewater Branch. It allocates money that comes from the EPA for wastewater projects nationwide, and they allocate the funds to the counties for qualifying projects. We receive money from this program every year, and in order to receive funds, the state has to have projects that are pre-approved on an approved list that they maintain. So we annually submit a list of projects that we feel are eligible for funding through this program. And so this is the list that goes through there. Just so that you know, the State Revolving Fund is a low interest loan program. The interest rate currently is 1.25% on potentially millions of dollars that we get every year from them. To put that in context, we recently sold $200 million of sewer revenue bonds in September, and the going interest rate on the open market right now is 4.2%. So it's a pretty big savings over the long term. And so that's why it's important for us to continue to do this. So there are a list of four projects. And I'd be happy to give you more details if you want on those projects, the funding years and the amounts, but those projects do add up to over $700 million worth of work. We do not anticipate getting $700 million of funding from the SRF. If you're interested, I can give you the amount of money that we've gotten each year over the past 6 years. It ranges from about $20 million to as much as $100 million per year. And we use this to offset our open market sewer revenue bond funds that we bring in. So whatever we can displace with this cheaper money, we do that. So I'd be happy to answer any questions about the specific 4 projects that are on this list or anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Babcock. I know that you said there's like the 4 projects, and are they at different stages? And could you just explain the different stages that they're at right now, or
Yeah.
phases? Phases? Yeah.
Yes, I'd be happy to. So the project number 1 is called Eva Beach Sewers, Section 4. That is budgeted in FY24 as a $50 million project. The project number 2, Honolulu Phase 1C, is a project that was funded in FY23, 24, 22, 23, 24, and 25. It has been awarded. It's a total project cost, construction cost of $517 million. That project is underway. The project number 3 is the Honolulu Solids Process Biogas Cleaning. That project is also underway. It was awarded. It uses FY22 funds. It's $30.75 million. And the Waipahu Wastewater Pump Station force main, that's a replacement, a new force main, a second force main backup, is not been awarded yet. It's scheduled for FY26, and its estimated budget cost is $150 million.
Thank you. I was just trying to follow that. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Sorry. fast.
Okay, I'll let everyone ask questions before I go on to my next questions. Okay, Councilmember Toba.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Director. So this is all the projects are in my district. So I guess my biggest question would be like, will this increase people's sewage fees? And are we aggressively, reaching out to the neighborhood boards? Because you know how our area representatives feel about a lot of stuff that's happening right now when it comes to sewer. So.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember, for that question. So these projects are all existing on our existing CIP, project list in our current 6-year CIP project list. So they've all been, I guess, vetted and part of a facilities planning process over the years, and so they're all. Considered projects that are important for us to do. And so they've all been budgeted, so they wouldn't have any different effect than, all the rest of our projects on sewer rates. The projects, many of them, yes, are in your district. I guess probably all of these are in your district. So there is public outreach with projects, with all of our projects in general. They are presented in the year that they're budgeted to, for the council briefings, the budget committee briefings and budget approval, process. Projects that affect neighborhoods, then we also go out, to neighborhood boards and try to keep the council member appraised of these projects. Some of these are already, underway. Project number 2 is a big project at the treatment plant, and project number 3 is also, a project at the treatment plant. These are projects to meet our consent decree requirements to upgrade the treatment plant to secondary, as well as a bunch of sort of energy and sustainability projects, which will help us reduce electricity costs in the long term and be more sustainable out there. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And yeah, wow, it really is all in Councilmember Toba's district. And so relating to the revolving fund itself, like which source of funding or revenue goes into that revolving fund? I know that we're not the state now, we don't know it, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, so the sewer fund has monies from sewer fee revenues. That's the monthly bills that we get. So that is sort of the cash portion of the sewer fund. And then there is bond funds that are also in the overall sewer fund. So part of that is SRF bond funds, and part of that is our revenue bond funds. So so then there is debt service to pay off all of the bonds. And that's a budget item, the debt service. And so the state revolving funds are low interest loans, funds that are paid with debt service, every year. And so the way the state revolving fund works is money that's paid back into the state revolving fund is then loaned out to, again, to either us or the other counties. And also some private wastewater operations are also eligible, I think, for those funds.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, members, any other questions? Okay, Councilmember Say.
So, Director, is it possible that we do cash CIP? You're flush with cash in the sewer revolving fund.
There is cash in the in our cash fund, yes.
Yes. The reason I bring this up is that if you're going to float 200 million at a 4.25% interest rate, I'd rather see us use the cash first before you float that over a 30-year period. That's all it is. I don't know. I think you do go and talk to BFS, but there has to be a better way because is it 4 years from now, we have another sewer rate increase based on the volume of water that families use, right? That's for Sand Island. So I just bring this up because it's like we're hitting a critical collision with all the other funds, fees that may be coming up. So for the council members, they should be aware of it because it is going to be a hefty increase. February 1st, I think BWS has made a great presentation to all boards that I do attend in regards to their water rate increases. So I think Department of Environmental Services will have to go back to the Honolulu neighborhood boards to share with them that we will be increasing our sewer fees. But the complaint for the constituency and voters was that you have a flat rate of gallons of water for sewer fees, and then anything above that, it increases. It's just that the flat rate was high for a lot of families that they didn't use the total volume of what was given. But no, I just wanted to say, just keep up the good work. And one final thought, is it possible for our congressional delegation to ask, or not ask, but recommend that they increase the ceiling for Hawaii's the State Department of Health revolving fund, whereby we could maybe acquire more or ask for more rather than a certain amount. I don't know. Cheap. It's cheap. 1.25%. That's real good. But I think for all of us, as you look down the road, interest rates are going to get higher and higher, tied to what's happened with the wildfire, what's happening on the national level. And I am concerned that a portion of our revenues that will be earmarked for interest and not principal is a concern. But Director Babcock, just keep up the good work. I think we had a lot of discussion when you made the presentation of what is improvement district, right, for Waipahu. And we had that nice discussion with Senator Favala. Hey, if you don't want your residents to get this assessment, repeal the law that you folks have passed. And you call a spade a spade. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor.
Oh, no, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so thank you, Councilmember, for those comments. We have a lot of work that needs to be done with the sewer system, including upgrades and modernization of treatment plants, a lot of projects that are related to sustainability and using less electricity and making our own electricity, becoming self-sufficient. In addition, we also have climate change, sea level rise projects that we need to protect some of our assets, and we have plans for those, and we've programmed those monies in, and it's quite expensive because some of our things are going to be underwater in the future. We also manage our money very carefully, and we really take a lot of pride in the fact that we get our projects done on time and on budget. It is a lot of money and it's expensive, but we do really do that in a very conservative and careful way. With respect to the cash, we do have a cash balance, but we do have a long-term funding and financing plans because we have 20 years we have to plan out 20 years in order to figure out rates, cash, and the backstop that you have to have in reserve when you issue new debt. And so we have to have quite a bit of cash available in order to continue to proceed with our projects. Like I mentioned, one of our projects is $517 million. So we actually have to have quite a bit of cash on hand to be able to make sure that we're able to make progress payments and as well as make our debt service, which is over about $250 million per year, or a little more than that. And we also have to have a reserve to back up, new debt that we issue. So over time, our cash reserves will be going down. Right now, it's kind of building up in anticipation of completing our very, very large project, which is a Sand Island wastewater treatment plant secondary upgrade, which is a couple of $2 billion. And so as we get up to starting and completing that project, we will be continuing, the cash balance is going to still be kind of large. After that, it will be able to, to decrease, but we've got to get over this kind of big hump, this singularity of a project that has to be done by 2035. But we're very sensitive to sewer rates, and we are currently in the process of doing a rate study, and we will be looking at, and we are looking at some different ways to structure, the sewer fee with respect to the base charge and the volumetric charges, as well as customer assistance programs and things like that. So that's a work in progress, and as soon as we're able to, to share that, we will do that. But appreciate the understanding of the program and its importance with respect to public health and protecting public health and the environment.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So I'm going to go with Councilmember Wire first and then Council Chair Waters.
Thank you, Chair. And just real quick, based off of Councilmember Say's question, I was just curious. So is there a way to get more of the revolving fund monies? And
yeah.
I ask because if there's things we could be doing to help work towards that too, like I don't know if it's a federal delegation thing, a state thing, I just would welcome insight on that.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Wire. And I forgot to answer that part of the question. So yes, so the state revolving funds are programmatic funds that come from EPA, and it is actually one of the easiest ways for the federal government to distribute money for things like wastewater and water, because there are existing programs and the mechanisms all exist, and it's a pretty easy conduit to get money out, for example, from Inflation Reduction Act or the other basic federal acts. So we anticipate that these amounts may go up fairly significantly, but EPA and Department of Health don't really know yet. So that is one of the reasons why we put in some big numbers to potentially be able to, because if we don't have approved projects, we'd have to we wouldn't be able to take the money. So in terms of how we could influence perhaps that process, that would be at the federal level, and I guess it is possible to do that, but it isn't something that we've been able to to specifically. I mean, I think we mention it when we do talk with representatives and senators. I did also want to mention, though, that we are looking at other federal sources. Specifically, there's a process called a program called WIFIA, which is another low-interest loan program run by EPA. And so we are looking at that as part of, in conjunction with our financial advisors, to potentially incorporate that into our program, especially with respect to the large Sand Island project. There are some advantages. It's not really lower interest rate because it basically goes at the market rate, but it does have some advantages in terms of delayed payments to allow you to, finance things over longer periods of time. So we are looking carefully at that. In addition, we are also anticipating doing some refinancing of some existing debt, which will save us, with the preliminary numbers, look like it could save us tens of millions of dollars, over 20 years. So we're in the process of doing that probably early next year. So thanks.
Great. Appreciate that, Mala Chair.
Thank you. Council Chair Waters.
Thank you so much. I just had a couple questions. First, dealing with procedure. So this is a state water pollution control revolving fund that the city can apply for, and it's a loan?
It's a loan, low interest loan.
Okay. What's the interest rate, and how does that compare to, say, a bond? If we issue
The interest
bond?
rate is currently 1.25%.
Okay.
And our open market bonds, most recently, even with our AA plus rating, was 4.2%.
Okay. Okay. And you said that earlier. Just wanted to highlight that. So it is a good thing. But the state, through the Department of Health, administers this fund. Where do they get the money from?
So they get this money from the Environmental Protection Agency, US EPA.
Okay. Can the state take a role and use the same fund just like we do? For example, cesspool conversion? Can the Department of Health or any of their state departments also access this fund?
So other counties can access the funds. They can request, an allocation, and they do.
How about the state? I guess what I'm getting at is,
I don't
why
think
is
the
it just
state
on
can.
us, the city, to convert all these cesspools? If they have money and can access it, they could help us out and do it themselves too. Guess what? That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. So I believe that the state cannot use the state revolving fund. It needs to go. It needs to go to pass on to the counties, and I believe private wastewater operations can also request funds. If in order for the state to fund like cesspool replacements, and they do have a current allocation and a program in place to do some of that.
Okay.
That was a separate state allocation from, legislative through a bill process.
Okay. I noticed the first thing on the list is Eva Beach Sewers Section 4 Improvement District. You recall the hearing that we had where Senator Favela and others were saying, we don't want to hook up because it's going to cost us money. Kind of controversial. Is this state water pollution control revolving fund going to be used for the main line that we talked about, that was the 25 million, or is it going to be used for the lateral hookups for each home?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the project that's put in there right now is our city project, which is all of the main collector sewers and the laterals up to people's property line. So that's the project. So it's the city portion.
Okay.
Now the state revolving funds could be used potentially for that other portion. It is something that is, I think, approvable for the use of that money according to the state and the EPA. So that is possible.
Because I don't mean to speak for the folks who live out in Eva, and I'm sure Councilmember Tolba can speak to this, but because I don't think people are necessarily against conversion to protect the environment, because we do know that that's dangerous for our water source, but it's the cost, right? So if we could use this fund to help the individual homeowners to connect to the main, I think you get the buy-in from the community. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. So it's a good point and a good suggestion, and we are looking into that and to some other options, and we haven't. Right now, I believe the resolution or bill is tabled essentially on moving forward with this project.
Right.
However, we are looking at some alternatives, including potentially a separate request from the state legislature to fund that the homeowner portion.
Sure.
Very early discussions on that, and also looking at some other options for the way for our project.
Okay.
So right now it's a little early to to talk more about that, but we're definitely kind of trying to think a little bit outside the box. This is the first sewer improvement district that's been done in decades, and so it is a good time for us to sort of reevaluate this process, and we are doing that right now. So when we have more good information to share on that, we will definitely do that.
Okay, great. I like what you're saying, thinking out of the box. But the legislative session is right around the corner, and I'm sure council members, say, former Speaker of the House or representatives will tell you, if you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah.
So no shame. Ask for help.
Yeah,
we got
thanks.
Kirk Favela on the Senate side, who works really well with the majority. Let's put some onus on him. Ask and have him help the city convert rather than just giving us a low-interest loan. But thinking out of the box, at a recent Hawaii State Association of Counties convention, there was a panel discussion on wastewater. And each county is dealing with the same thing that we are with regard to cesspools. Like Miloli'i, very remote area. What do they do with their wastewater? Because they don't have a Honolulu or Sand Island wastewater treatment plant that they can pipe the sewage to miles and miles and miles away. So one of the things that they talked about was perhaps creating, and again, I'm talking about thinking out of the box, a mini sewage processing plant in the local communities, and then reusing that water so it filters down through and we save it and it goes to the water table rather than pumping it out to the ocean, because that's what we're currently doing, right? We pump it out to the ocean. The other thing is we could use it for fire safety, right? Could you imagine if Maui saved all that wastewater and they irrigated the land so that it wasn't so barren, and we're having fires here in Mililani and all over the place? And because of climate change, it's real. So we're talking about thinking out of the box. Stop pumping it out into the ocean and using it for other things.
Yeah, so thank you for that suggestion. So we do have a water reuse, program, and it's very active. The biggest one in the state is a partnership with the Board of Water Supply. So at Honolulu, currently half of all the wastewater is turned into the highest quality recycled water, and it's used for irrigation of many golf courses and other green spaces, as well as industrial use in Campbell Industrial Park for boiler water. And that there is a master plan actually for the Everplain area to use 100% of all the water. So exactly what you're talking about. We do have a partnership with the state, ADC, for reuse of Wahiawa, all of Wahiawa's wastewater that currently goes into the Dole irrigation ditch. It's going to go up to the Galbraith lands. State allocated some funds, gave some funds to the city. Our project to do the upgrades needed at the treatment plant, which is a pump station to get the water there, is budgeted. So we're actually, I believe that project is out to bid. It's on the street right now. And we also have other water recycling projects in planning and in design, essentially all over the island. So you're right, it's absolutely important for us to do this resource recovery. With respect to cesspool replacement and cluster systems or small systems out in communities, there's been a lot of evaluations done on that, and it really depends. It really comes down to cost. There are different options in places where you could just put in cesspools, replace cesspools with septic tanks and leach fields. It's going to be a cheaper option than having to put in collection systems and treatment plants and disposal systems. And one of the big things is cost of land to site those facilities. But yes, those are very important issues, and we are in those discussions with respect to how we move forward on Oahu. So on Oahu, we don't have as many cesspools as many other places. There's only 8,000 or so, which sounds like a big number. nothing compared to 60,000 on Big Island. But we have plans to do sewer improvement districts or something like that for a fairly large percentage of those, a little less than half right now. And then, still working on how to help address, the remainder.
It's so good to know. And thank you, Chair. And thank you. That's why I love Committee Week, because we can have discussions like this and learn a lot from each other. So thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for the question. Yeah.
Members, any other questions? Okay, Councilmember Zay.
Director, do we have a plan in regards to the replacement of our sewer lines adjacent to our rail system? The plan, is there a master plan? Because our predecessors always said, when you build a rail, there'll be the developments of all these affordable homes, businesses, etc. But if the sewer lines are not capable of accepting the increased volume of sewer, it's going to set us back maybe another 10, 20 years to get these particular projects adjacent to the line constructed. Or would you want us to tell the Heart Board, you guys do the plan for us?
Yeah, so that is part of our job. So any project has to get a sewer connection through a sewer connection application, which goes through DPP, and then it comes to ENV, because we're the ones that have the most up-to-date information on capacities. DPP has that as well, but whenever there's a question, and any kind of large project, they're working directly with us. So we do have extensive master planning. We call it a facility plan for all of our basins, but in particular, the most important ones are Sand Island Basin, which goes up to Red Hill on the east side, on the west side, and then Honolulu, which comes all the way out to Red Hill and essentially to Kapolei on the other side and up to Mililani. So there are projects to address existing capacity requirements in all those basins, as well as, for the most part, most of the anticipated projects. We don't know all of, necessarily of the future projects, but as they come in, we're able to do the evaluations and determine whether we have existing capacity and then what projects would be needed to upgrade. And then it would be a decision whether the city wants to require, the builder to finance any, offsite improvements, or whether that would be perhaps potentially the city's contribution to, say, affordable housing or something like that. But that would come up on as those projects are developed. With respect to affordable housing, if it meets certain criteria, the builders are eligible for waiving of certain fees from both Board of Water Supply and Environmental Services for water and sewer. Those large connection fees for high rises, they can be millions of dollars. Those can be waived for eligible projects. They have to have a certain percentage of affordable units and a certain AMI, ratings and stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Council Chair Waters.
Thank you. Just wanted to follow up on what you're saying. We recently met with the Stadium Authority, and they want to build a new stadium and a bunch of new apartments all around the stadium. And they seemed like they were asking us, the city, to kick in some money because you got to bring the sewer lines to the Halava area. Have they talked to you about this? And is the administration thinking about kicking in some money for that? Because I think it was probably in the range of $30 million or more just to get the sewer lines to Halava, not even the hookups.
Yeah,
I'm just curious.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. So, yes, so we have been in discussions with NACED for many years, actually, through the planning process of that. And they have given us different plans, over the years and different numbers of units. The current sewers that service the stadium are sized for a 60,000 seat stadium. I think it's 60,000, maybe it's only 50,000 seat stadium, which is, not very large flow. So So additional sewer, capacity will be needed in order to, depending on how many residential units end up in the final plan. That project is slated to take several years, to build out, probably 10 years. And so an interesting thing is there are a series of projects that's at kind of the very eastern edge of the Honolulu Basin. That the wastewater from there does not go to Sand Island. It goes out to Honolulu, so it goes around Pearl Harbor and out to, so it's pumped several times. And we have some capacity projects, a series of capacity projects that in the area that are already all planned out that will be happening over the next 8 to 10 years, which will actually have enough capacity for the new stadium and area projects. Those projects existed prior to and without the stadium upgrades, but they will have capacity. So what I would say is that the projects that we have were not specifically designed or are not costing more because of the stadium development. The exception would be the very close connection, which is right where from the stadium to connect everything in there, put it in more of a sewer system to get to our sewer lines. And we've also been working with them on some ways to do some interim upgrades and of the sewage infrastructure in the area, so that they can start construction, but sewer flows will take a long time to actually build up to the full capacity that's needed. And so their project will be going on in parallel with our other projects, so that there will always be capacity as that project develops, over the years. I hope that helps I hope that's clear. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, that the current system, I think they want to build like 10 buildings, right? A mix of affordable and market rate and whatnot. But I like what you're saying, that you can build their finance improvements. But, when we're dealing with developers, they always say it doesn't pencil, especially when building affordables. And I'm afraid that they might say the same thing. If we make them pay for the sewer improvements, they may not build, or it won't be affordable anymore. So I'm just curious, can we use the State Water Pollution Control Revolving Fund, because it's such a low interest, to build up capacity so that when they are ready? And by the way, I like the idea. I like what the Stadium Authority is proposing, with the exception of seats that don't have any backs. I don't like that part of the stadium plan, but I like the part about building homes for people to live. So just being creative, if we can perhaps use this same revolving fund to help, and that would be our skin in the game in helping the TOD project.
Yeah, so we'll be looking at that carefully. Right now, we don't have any specific projects that are needed for the Stadium Authority that we haven't already programmed. We can use the state revolving funds for any projects really that we want, as long as we designate it as such. But right now, so we could do that in the future. We could designate and use that money specifically for those projects.
Cool, good to know. Thank you, Chair.
Those are very great ideas, Council Chair. Okay, members, any other questions before we go on to testimony? Okay, thank you, Director Babcock.
Thank you.
We don't have any registered remote or in-person testifiers. However, I do see Angela Young's hand raised.
Aloha, Chair and City Council. Angela Melody Young, testifying on behalf of CARES. So dirty water affects us all differently. Some communities may be more affected, and some may not be as affected. And CARES wants to share with you this report from the Department of Health, the Environmental Management Division Wastewater Branch, prepared by DOH and submitted to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. And this is called the Clean Water State Revolving Fund Intended Use Plan. And Each year, the program is required to prepare this plan as part of the request to the Environmental Protection Act for an annual capitalization grant. And the plan sets program goals, describes the intended use of federal and state funds, and describes how the program will meet the Appropriations Act for the federal fiscal year. And the plan has a list of priority projects in the following order from 1 to 109. And both Honolulu projects are at the top of the priority list, while Waipahu is somewhere in the middle and Ewa Beach is all the way at the bottom. So if you read this report, you'll find the rationale to how they prioritize these projects, the criteria, the reasons to how DOH backs it up to according to the environmental protection standards, because there are federal standards to meet to get the loans and the funds.
Thank you. Thank you, Angela. Okay, members, not members. Is there anyone else in person or online who wishes to testify? Seeing none, members, we're back in discussion. Any other further discussion or questions for the director? Okay, moving forward, the chair recommends that, Resolution 23-263 be reported out for adoption. Any discussion? Any objections? Reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Moving forward to agenda item number 5. This is the update from the administration on hazard pay and the state and local fiscal recovery funds program to offset the fiscal year 25 expenses. Oh, there you are. Okay, well, also, before I get to our city administration, we have a mayor's message 234 that is being passed out. It is also available online on Honolulu HNL Docs. You can find it under mayor's messages, communications, mayor's messages, and mayor's message 234. From our city administration relating to the update, we have our managing director, Mike Formby. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. Good morning, Budget Chair Cordero, Vice Chair Wire, Chair and Vice Chair and council members. Mike Formby, Managing Director. So I appreciate this opportunity to come and speak and answer questions. I have had the opportunity within the Sunshine Law to speak to a couple of you, but I was precluded from going any further. So to have this opportunity to speak this morning is very important. And I want to tell you also that I have to be very careful about what I say because we are in arbitration. We went through initial arbitration with SHOPO, and I can update you on that, where that is, but we're in arbitration with UPW right now, so I don't want to say anything that might prejudice the city's position in arbitration. And I do offer to go into executive session where I can speak more freely about legal matters, and I think that would help you. But I do want to speak publicly first about the letter dated November 9th, 2023. And Budget Chair, I take it that's the mayor's message that you're referred to? The November 9th letter? Thank you. So the November 9th letter was written following a meeting that I had with the chair and the vice chair of the council regarding the administration's concern that in light of this council's resolution 23-114, which was introduced on June the 1st and adopted unanimously on June the 7th, asking that the administration provide hazard pay and negotiate with the unions to establish a reasonable and comprehensive provision for eligibility to hazard pay. We think it's also important that we be fair. And in planning for that, what we wanted to do was ask the council to consider reallocating FRF funds. And we know under the U.S. Treasury guidelines that the administration could have taken the entire sum that was given to the city and county of Honolulu as revenue replacement initially. We did our calculations, so the whole $386 million could have come into the city and county of Honolulu to make up for the losses that we experienced due to the pandemic. But this council and the administration agreed through the allocation of Tranche 1 and Tranche 2 funds to principally get these monies out to the community for benefits, community benefits. And those community benefits were both direct and indirect. And we've been doing that. And we're at a point where we know that about 300 million of the 386 million is going to community benefits, direct and indirect. But we're now asking the council to consider reallocating a portion of Tranche 2, and the administration is willing to reallocate a portion of Tranche 1 so that in the event we come to an agreement with the unions, we will have an offset against the fiscal year 25 budget. And I can tell you that the administration is very concerned about the fiscal year 25 budget if we end up paying hazard pay. We think it will have a significant impact and it will potentially affect our ability to fund operations. And so I would like to ask you to consider the Tranche 2 allocation. Both are roughly $40 million. I would actually like to go between $80 and $100 million, but right now we're looking at $80 million, 40 from Tranche 1, 40 from Tranche 2. And so that's why I'm here today to speak to you, happy to answer any questions, and then would like to go into executive session where I can be more specific with you about potential numbers. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we move on, I just would like to ask, since you did provide us and publicly with the Appendix A, is there public Tranche 1 funds that are on the city administration priorities list that will then be reallocated? And
Yes.
will we be able to know that?
So you're asking about the Tranche 1 side?
Yes.
Yeah, we will make those public. What we're in the process of doing now is actually making the departments come back into the committee and account for us where they are in implementing those projects. And if they haven't reached a certain point, then we're telling them we're going to take them back. Because we think if we ask the council to reallocate 40 million of Tranche 2 funds, we should meet the council on reallocating Tranche 1 funds. So we will be providing that publicly.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to keep within the realm of what we are able to speak here. Is there a timeline for that process you just mentioned?
Well, as I've explained on the state side, because we're having discussions with the state and the other counties, it's important that we have this amount of money available at the time we submit our budget on March 2nd.
Okay.
Because we need to be able to tell council that to have a balanced budget, we propose that FRF funds go to OPEB or whatever their expense council might desire that we commit it to, and that would give us capacity in the budget.
Okay. I understand the request to go into executive session, but I do want to allow for members to ask carefully questions that we may have publicly as well. Members, are there any questions? Council Vice Chair Kia Aina, followed by Council Chair Waters.
Thank you. So just big picture wise, are you hoping that we are able to take care of the totality of hazard pay without having to take funds from our fiscal 25 budget? So in other words, both Tranche 1 as well as Tranche 2, we might be able to take care of the totality?
Let me see how I can answer that without getting too let me just say there's a lot of moving parts. We know from settlement agreements and arbitrations that have already happened in other counties, we know what percentages are coming back, and we've tried to extrapolate from those percentages in certain bargaining units to look at what our potential exposure might be. It obviously depends upon what you would negotiate with the union, but what I'm trying to do is create capacity for a settlement agreement that might include a multi-year settlement. And so I just won't know. There's no way for me to project or for the administration to project right now without knowing what those settlement agreements or arbitrations might look like, what that total number will be. But I'm asking that we consider putting the remaining unexpended, unencumbered balance of FRF funds toward our fiscal year 25 expenses so that by the time that the budget is under discussion, we have the capacity the leeway to at least budget for hazard pay, not knowing what that number is going to be. And if the number is too high, let's say, just hypothetically, let's say we came up with 80 million and we paid OPEB 80 million, and then we created the capacity. But if after we did all of our negotiations or arbitrations, the number came in at 150 million, then we might have to, do a 2-year budget. So I'm just trying to create as much capacity as I can in the fiscal year 25 budget, not knowing what the exposure is actually going to be.
And then just one follow-up question. So you have given us a list of the Tranche 2 clawbacks, right? And so with regard to tranche one, those are all funds that the administration had identified. It doesn't impact any council member requests, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And I will get you a list of the Tranche 1 projects that we're reallocating.
Thank you very much. Council Chair Waters.
Thank you, Chair, for having a hearing on this, and thank you, Managing Director. So I'm just looking at Mayor's Message 234. What you're asking, if I'm seeing this correctly, that you want to reallocate the remaining funds from Tranche 2, which is approximately 39 million, and put it into the OPEB account. And the reason there is, I mean, ultimately, well, rather than just keeping it for hazard pay, you want to put it in the OPEB account? Could you explain why?
Yeah, I can explain more. So the federal hazard pay provisions under the U.S. Treasury guidelines do allow for us to do a direct hazard pay, but it's extremely difficult, and it wouldn't be something that you could actually do through a settlement. It requires that you do a case-by-case analysis, and that analysis of each employee include AMI by household of all family members that live in the household. And then it puts a cap on the AMI for eligible employees. So what we're saying is that that process does not work well for 9,000 plus employees, and it would take probably a number of years to go through that process. What we're saying is we should take the 80 million, or whatever that number ends up being, as revenue replacement, which is allowed under the U.S. Treasury guidelines, pay down what we know to be a major expense so that we create capacity for this council to appropriate money for hazard pay.
What I'm afraid of is if we don't sock it away and save it for hazard pay, that we might say, well, sorry, we don't have the money down the line, right? Because we've already spent it on OPEB. I agree with you. Hindsight is 2020, right? And during the pandemic, you know, had we thought about setting aside money for hazard pay or paying it while people were working, it would have been easier, right? Because we know who's at home and who's at work getting exposed. But do you agree with me, though, that within the UPW and HGA, and that's really who we're talking about, right? Who we're negotiating with, that the hazard really did exist. I mean, people were dying, right? I don't think that's an issue, is it? The whether or not the hazard actually existed and whether or not the contract covers the pandemic.
Yeah, so, Council Chair, I would agree with you that there was a pandemic. I don't think that I should state here as an administration that there is a hazard to which people are entitled, because we are in arbitration, and I don't want to prejudice any positions that the lawyers might have taken. In executive session, I think I could speak more freely to you about that, and I'm willing to do that. I will tell you that what we have done, because the administration believes that it's very important that we treat our city essential workers fairly, is we have gone out to the departments on 2 occasions. The first one we did was on August 21st, 2023. We sent out surveys to the departments, to the directors, and this was the pilot, and it went out to 6 departments. And we asked the department directors, not the employees, which is different than what they did on the state side. I think you might remember that on the state side, DHERD sent surveys out to all state employees and asked them to tell the state whether or not they were on leave, sick leave, family leave, workers' comp, or whether they teleworked. And HGEA protested that, and the survey system basically shut down. We worked with HGEA in advance to let them know that we were going to be surveying our department directors and asking them to categorize their employees. And after the pilot, which went really well, we sent out a second group of surveys on October the 10th to the rest of the departments, and we received all but 4 back. So we're in a position to basically look at our workforce and categorize them by risk of exposure. And I'm not saying that the unions will agree with the federal OSHA risk of exposure, but basically for COVID-19, OSHA put it into 4 categories of exposure. And we're now doing that on the city side so we can begin to estimate what our risk might be, financial risk might be. But the goal is to enter into hopefully settlement negotiations in good faith and figure out how we can come up with a number that we can live with in our city budget.
I appreciate that very much. I was going to ask you, how do we determine who was exposed and who wasn't? But certainly using the OSHA standard is you know, at least consistent and predictable. So that's good. I mean, I think we can learn from what the other counties are doing. My understanding is that Maui already settled with the government workers, and it was, I believe, 20% of the base pay for the 18 months during the pandemic. I don't know how much ultimately that was, a dollar amount. Do you happen to know that?
I do not, but I can tell you just top level what I know is Maui settled with UPW first at 20% across the board over an 18-month period. And then HGEA went to arbitration on Maui before Judge Carl Sakamoto, and they got 25% for 1,300 workers over a 24-month period. And I understand that SHOPO has tentatively entered into an agreement with Maui, but it has not been signed yet. The last time I spoke to Mayor Bisson, it had not been signed yet. And I believe it was 20% for patrol and 15% for non-patrol. So what we do is we take those percentages and we extrapolate them to our workforce to know that if we had to pay those numbers, we could not do it within our current revenue stream and have a balanced budget.
Yeah, that's the scary part, and that's what I'm talking about with other departments. We all got to maybe tighten our belt. The judiciary also, I believe, settled as well, right? Was that 20%, the judiciary?
The judiciary had the same agreement with UPW, 20%, only cover 180 employees, 2.4 million. So it's a really small pool.
Right, that was an easy one. When you talk about what SHOPO did on Maui, was that all patrol officers or just across the board, just patrol?
To my understanding, it was two categories, patrol, non-patrol, all employees.
I see.
But I should say, I'm not sure what the SHOPO agreement was, but each agreement does define exclusions from the categories that take. For example, if you look at the UPW agreement on Maui, it specifically allows them to carve out vacation leave, sick leave, compensatory time off, workers' compensation, telework, or work from home arrangements, administrative leave, without pay or with pay. So there are carve-outs that does vary by union.
Interesting. You know, like you said, that was the settlement that you just read for the carve-outs, or was that part of the collective bargaining contract?
This is the UPW settlement on Maui.
Settlement, I see. Yeah. Okay. Well, you know, when you talk about SHOPO, was it in their contract, their collective bargaining contract, that they're entitled to hazard pay for things like a pandemic? Because it seems like their job just in general is hazardous.
Yeah, so just speaking generally, my understanding is that on Oahu, SHOPO did file basically a hazard pay for 25% across the board. And I think it was as a class action, and it was denied by Judge Milks. And she basically directed SHOPO to resubmit with the city and county, and that we have to go through an analysis by classes. And so that's where we're at right now. We don't actually have a decision that has the revenue tied to it, but we know that we need to go back and work with SHOPO on what those classifications might be. And on Maui, it was patrol versus non-patrol.
I see. And retired Judge Melks was the arbitrator?
That's correct.
Okay. I know that there's currently a claim on the Big Island as well. And my understanding is that the attorney generals are saying, wait, before the judge enters a ruling as to whether or not the hazard existed, that they want to try to negotiate a universal settlement. Is that your understanding as well, that the state wants to work with the mayors to try to figure out a fair, equitable solution?
Yeah, Chair, at this point, that's what I would like to discuss in executive session.
I see. Okay.
Okay.
Almost done, though. You answered most of my questions. I have a whole list. Okay, so we have not made an offer to the employee unions yet.
That's correct.
Okay.
But we have been, Chair, I should say, we're in constant talks with the unions. So we've met with UPW, HGEA, and SHOPO, and we do let them know that we are interested in being fair to our employees.
That's great. I mean, one of the things I think of when we talk about having 3,000 vacancies, you know, we got to take care of the employees that we do have that are working hard for all of us. And to the extent that we can provide fair compensation for the hazards that they actually did, and we acknowledged people were dying, right? That there was that. So going forward, we're about to enter into the budget stage, right? Is the administration looking at ways to restrict spending and finding cost savings so that we can use this cost savings to take care of this pending bill that we have? I know that you said that on the current status is we won't be able to pay for this unless we start really either clawing back money from tranche 1 and 2. And by the way, I'm willing to help and work with you to find even more in tranche 2 that we could put towards hazard pay. But really, we might have to start looking at our spending as well.
So, Chair, I agree with you, and the mayor and I have been messaging to the departments at our cabinet meetings exactly that, and we've told them that they should anticipate that there will be restrictions on travel and current expenses and other things that in the past we haven't exactly had to curb back. We're going to have to do that, and so that you're exactly right. That's part of the message.
Last thing is that my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, if we do want to reappropriate anything from either tranche 1 or tranche 2, that it has to come through resolution by the administration, because we can't initiate it. We looked at doing this in last year's budget, but according to our attorneys, it really has to be started from the administration with a reso, which I'm happy to introduce on your behalf. But do you agree with that process, that it has to come through resolution from the admin?
Chair, I haven't had a chance to look into that, and I would like to consult with Corporation Counsel, but I would tell you that the administration is interested in doing it as publicly and transparently as possible, because it does mean that we're going to have to amend the plan that we filed with the U.S. Treasury.
I see. Well, that makes sense. But that's my understanding is just from a procedural standpoint, in order to open up a budget, which you know has already been passed, because I honestly thought we could just amend next year's budget, but it seems like we got to go through resolution. But we could talk about that
Happy to do
procedurally
that.
as well. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Members, before we do so, I would like to take up testimony. We don't have any members of the public that are registered to testify, except I do see Angela Young with her hand raised.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and the City Council. Angela Melody Young testifying on behalf of CARES. In strong support of the update from the administration on hazard pay and the state and local physical recovery funds program to offset the fiscal year 25 expenses. So in this case, I'm not too sure about like the technical terminologies and structuring of the funds, but when I was at the bus stop, the Kalihi Transit Center, the staff asked if the resolution went well, and they asked if it finally got enacted, because they saw me on television talking about the hazard pay. And I was like, no, I don't know if everything got resolved. So I'm just glad to be here to hear about these things that are affecting the districts and communities across the state. And I hope things get resolved.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, is there anyone else who wishes to testify in person or online? Seeing none, members, it appears that we need to go into executive session with respect to item number 5, as posted on the agenda, to consult with the committee's attorney on questions and issues pertaining to the powers, duties, privileges, immunities, and liabilities of the city. The following persons will be participating in executive session: all council members, our corporation counsel and deputy corporation counsel, our Office of Consular Services, Kyle Shiroma and Sharon Brooks, as well as, you can say, actually, and my chief of staff, Dina Schwering. And members, are there any objections to convening into executive session? Nope. Okay. With no, before I do that though, I have to say, the next committee on executive management will start at 11:20. 11:20. Okay. Thank you to the committee chair, our council chair Waters, for allowing this meeting to go a little bit longer. Okay. With no objections, the committee convenes into a closed meeting pursuant to Hawaii Revised Statutes sections 92-4 and 92-5A4 to consult with its attorneys on questions and issues pertaining to the powers, duties, privileges, immunities, and liabilities of the city, the council, and its committees on this matter. Right? Okay, for the purposes, let's see, I will now call a recess.
Pursuant to Hawaii Revised Statute Section 92-4 and 92-5A4, the committee has met in executive session and discussed item number 5 on the agenda. We're now reconvened in open session, and there being no further business, the meeting is adjourned.